Maybe you have the hand up. Sound level okay? We're not blasting anybody out of here?
Voice sounds familiar.
Our guest tonight is Yuven Sundaramurthy. Let me just give you a couple of quick statistics on him. In 2018, he ran 200 series. In those 20 races, he had 17 top 5 finishes. One third place, 6 second places, and 2 wins. He ended up third in the season's championship. Those 20 races, by the way, were each 30-minute races. Every weekend he got 3 hours of track time, so you can do the math on how much racing he got in this year. And that was just the FRP, United States Auto Club events. He also ran some SCCA races. So we'll get into all of that. Thank you for joining us. Wonderful to see so many people here this evening. Yuven, I guess the question we should begin with is, how did you get interested in racing?
Should I take the mic here? Yeah. So basically, we used to live in China for 6 years, so the majority of my life used to be in China until recently when we moved back here. And we lived in Shanghai for 3 of those years, and as many of you guys probably know, Shanghai is where the Formula One track is located. And we were actually literally 20 minutes away from the Formula One track. So one day my dad was like, do you want to go see a race? You can pick MotoGP, F1, or drag racing. And I was like, okay, let's go see an F1 race. So we went to the track, watched F1, and I was immediately hooked to it. It was really interesting to watch, really fun to watch, especially from the seats that we had, you could see the whole track from there. So it was really a nice experience. So basically we just went and asked, well, how do we get into this? And there's a go-kart track on the facility, and they were like, you can go over to the go-kart track, get in some of the rental cars, and we just drove around in the rental carts. And slowly from then on, I progressed to be a little bit more than just the rental cart. So we got an actual faster cart called a Rotax Micromax cart, and just did laps around that. No races in China, just laps with an instructor. And basically, because we were so close, every day I'd come back from school, go to the racetrack, and drive laps.
What year was that, and how old were you?
That was 5 years ago when I was 10 years old.
Okay, so now we've got you up into the real go-karts. Tell us a little bit about your experience with them, both in China, and then when did you come back to the United States?
Yeah, so in China it was completely coaching with an instructor who only spoke Chinese. So it was a bit tough because I could speak Chinese well, but it was just a little of the subtlety where it's like, oh, you need to have, there's too much understeer, words like that didn't exist that I knew of. But I was only there for 1 year karting there, and then we moved back 4 years ago, I believe. And this is where I had my first race in the Mini-Max category, which is 1 step higher than what I drove in China. And it took a while to get up to speed. I was pretty slow originally, and then we went to one race called the Florida Winter Tour, which is a national event, my first national event, where I finished 15th, I think, as my best finish out of like 20, so not that great. But after I came back from that national event, in all the regional races, I swept 7 in a row. So that event, doing so poorly there, just helped me realize how, gave me a bunch of new ability to look at all the other better drivers.
Can you give us a little bit more of the technical specs of what the cars were in terms of displacement, weight, things like that?
Yeah, so the Mini-Max category, which is what I started out here, is 13 horsepower. They run about 235 pounds with the driver. And it's 125cc, all the karting engines are 125.
And where did you race in the Northeast?
In the Northeast, I ran in a track called Oakland Valley Race Park, about 2 hours away from here, down towards New Jersey.
Did you own these cars, or was this like a rental program, or did you actually own and maintain them?
Yeah, so once I started racing, we had to get a cart. We owned the cart, maintained the cart. We got a team. We ran with a team that would help us tune the cart and all that stuff. Because when we first started, we had no idea what we were doing. We just went to the track. They helped us prepare the cart, and we went out and drove.
Any other tracks that you ran besides Oakland Valley in the Northeast?
Yeah, so for the first 2 years, I was only running at Oakland Valley. But then after that, we after that national race in Florida, we started running all over, so New Jersey, Pittsburgh, and yeah, a lot of other tracks.
Oakland Valley, if you're not familiar with it, is down by Monticello. And they do kart racing, and they also do some kart endurance racing, so they do a ride and drive down there as well. Have you ever done any of those endurance events?
No, I haven't.
So you did karting. What was the impetus for making the transition to cars?
Yeah, so basically we had no plan of moving up to karts, and one of our good friends, Stephen McAleer, who is a coach at Monticello, came up to us and he's like, you guys should try Spec Miata. So he said, we've got a 3-day course at Monticello in the Spec Miata, you should go try it out. Sorry. So basically I ran that and did pretty well. Was about 4 seconds off of Steven's pace, which is decent for the first time ever in a car. That's a stick shift, first time ever driving a stick shift. So that was tough to figure out.
Miatas are good to learn on.
I may have hit a barrier and had to reverse out once in the weekend. But but it was a really good learning experience. And from then on, we were planning to still do a couple more years of karting. But then we were reached out at one of the first karting races that year by another team owner called Jake Motaz, and he said, oh, there's this series called F1600, you should try it out. So we obviously were curious about it, so we asked, okay, how do we get started? And we went back to the team owner, the track owner of Oakland Valley, Tim Hannon, and he said, oh, there's this team called Cahill that you should run with. And then also with further research, there was also the other team, called Team Pelfrey. So we decided to do 2 tests with both teams and eventually made the decision to run with Cahill and ended up running that year completely blind. So within a 1-month span, we ended up planning from doing 2 more years of karting to doing a year of cars.
What was the transition like going from the karts to the F1600 car?
Yeah, it was pretty bad. The first time in the car, I was 25 seconds off the pace in the 1600 car. By the end of that first event, I was only 9 seconds off, so got better. But it was just a lot more. The kart, you barely move your steering wheel. So the maximum degree of rotation that you get is probably like 15 or 30 degrees, but in the car you have to go. It's not like a road car where you have multiple rotations, but you still go like about 90 degrees to get around the corner. And then also getting the shifting in. It's the F1600 is a 4-speed gearbox. It has a foot clutch, but you don't use it when you actually shift. It's just for launch.
Do the people at Cahill know that?
So that was tough to get used to, and then still have to flip on the downshifts. We use our left foot for the brake just because the cockpit's so small that you can't fit your right foot onto the brake. So we have left foot and then timing the downshifts to flip with the right foot as you get into gear. That was the tough part.
Let's go back. F1600 is what SCCA calls Formula F, 1600cc, in this case a Honda Fit engine, Formula car chassis, no aerodynamics, spec tires provided by Hoosier. Have you done any racing in the rain before you got to the F1600?
Funny enough, my first race in the F1600 car was in the rain. And it was at Road Atlanta, which is uphill, downhill, blind corners, so that was interesting. But yeah, in karting I had a lot of rain experience, so I was pretty good in the rain. And then moving to cars, it was a lot easier. In my first actual downpour rain, the first race was only damp, not a full downpour.
The format for the F1600 weekends is typically 2 30-minute practice sessions, a 30-minute qualifying session, and then 3 30-minute races. So that's how Yuvan would get his track time at these events. You did 2 seasons in F1600. The first year you were in this series, you had some notable events, including a race in Indianapolis.
Yeah, so that was definitely a high point of my career. That was it was a combination with an SVRA, which is the vintage racing event. They hosted the track, and the FRP series joined in with them. And it was a supposed to be a 3-race event like normal, except they cut it down to 2 because the SCCA Formula 4 series needed an extra slot, time slot, so they took away one of our races. And that was a great weekend for me on the Indianapolis road course track. I was able, in the race 1 there, I won, which was my first ever win, which is pretty good to have at Indianapolis, so I got to stand on the Indy 500 podium and all that. But then, because of all the publicity for winning, the announcers were all like, oh, this 14-year-old just won. But it turns out that the rule is you have to be 15. So, yeah, the word ended up spreading out, and I was not allowed to run in the second race because I was too young.
That was your third ever weekend in that 1600 car?
Yeah. Yeah, my first ever weekend was in VAR where I got pole, but then was not able to get a podium.
So his first ever race in Indianapolis, he picks up the victory. His first win in the F1600 series. His first win ever in F600 comes at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. The rest of the year, you were a contender most of the way. Tell us about some of the other tracks you visited.
Yeah, all of the tracks that we run at are fun. They're not like F1 style tracks, so a lot of them are far deep down in the country. And one of the notable tracks, my favorite, especially it used to be before it was repaved, was Summit Point Motor Speedway, or Summit Point Raceway in West Virginia. I love that track because it's so small, it's kind of like Lime Rock Park, that if you mess up a corner, you don't need to wait too long to like learn from it and fix it the next time. And there's also this one corner, turn 5, where it's designed in such a way that you can come from a long way back and still make a pass. And the way that race went that year is every lap I made a pass into turn 5. I started out, they would be on the outside, I'd go down to the inside. Then once they started figuring that out, they started to move to defend to the inside, so I drove around the outside. And then once they started going to the middle, we went 3 wide and still were able to make a pass to there. So that was really fun. But now after the repave, there's so much grip there that you can't really get that type of a passing move in.
The F1600 series is probably the best racing series that you will ever see anywhere. It's not unusual to see 6, 8, even 10 cars in the lead pack racing nose to tail. And because these cars don't have any wings, slipstreaming or drafting, as the NASCAR folks like to call it, is really a skill that all of these drivers develop. Tell us a little bit about driving in the slipstream.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So the first time, my first ever time driving the 1600 car was just with my coach on track in another car. And I literally, after the first session, I went up to him and asked him, why are you hitting the brakes down the straightaway? Because I thought that's how much the slipstream is in those cars, because there's no wings, there's no wash. It's just, you get sucked completely up. The advantage in qualifying, if you get a good lap completely in the slipstream, you can gain 3 seconds. It's that big. So on a 1.5 minute track, gaining 3 seconds is huge. So you have to get really used to that. And because of that in the race, it's difficult to pull away. So it's really a skill if you can pull away with someone pulling 3 seconds on you a lap from the draft.
The other side of that is when you come out of the last turn at a track like New Jersey, there can be 3 or 4 guys trying to find racing room at the finish line.
Yeah, so at VIR, the starting line is quite far away from the last corner, and what happens is you can come out of that last corner, get a draft, and still pass before the start-finish line. So the strategy in the series is that you have to know where to be on the last lap, and it's not usually first place, because the draft is so big that you can't really defend in first place. So at that VIR event, all 3 of our races were determined by less than 1/10 of a second. So it was always side by side across the start-finish line because of that long draft. Coming out of the corner, the second place guy would get a run, and if you got a good enough run, he'd pass the first place guy before the start-finish. Otherwise, they'd be like side by side coming to the line.
It was interesting that VIR was like that. Pittsburgh also raced that way, and New Jersey raced that way.
Yeah, New Jersey was my other win that year, the last race of the season. That was a big one for me. Yeah, just good way to end off the season. That one was a very big strategy decision because New Jersey, there's really one big passing zone. So every lap we were switching, me and another driver were able to pull away from the field, so it was just us two. And every lap coming across the line, it'd be a different person every time. And I actually hit the brakes down the straightaway to get behind him going into the last lap, just so I wouldn't be leading on the last lap. So it's very difficult for a racer to be like, oh, I need to get behind him. I need to be second. But it's actually the advantageous way to do it.
So all of that went on in his first season of F1600. Then he came back for more. You were Mr. Second Place for quite a while during the 2018 season.
Yeah, I was running second in the championship a lot, getting a lot of second place finishes. But the standout of this year was the MidOhio race, MidOhio race weekend. In that race, we ran a total of 55 green flag laps, and I led 48 of them. So I was able to stay in the lead, defend. That's one of the tracks that you need to be able to break really deep, and you can actually defend your position going into their turn forward, what they call it. And basically there, you could, I was doing, because I had experience from the previous year, I was able to go a full brake marker, a full 100 feet deeper than most people. So they'd go for a pass around the outside, I'd brake deep. They'd go for a pass around the inside, I'd brake deep. So we were 3 wide there most of the laps. But I only came out with 1 win that weekend because 2 of them I got passed in the last lap. So that was another big learning experience because I was giving away all my moves. I was making the same move every single lap, trying to get that defense. So the guys behind me were strategizing. They were like, okay, I know he's going to do this. So what am I going to do on this last lap to get by him?
Let's go back to 2017 for a minute. In addition to running the Formula Race Promotions F1600 series, you also ran a number of SCCA Majors races.
Yeah, the Majors races are really good races, really good practice for the Pro Series races. Got a bunch of good people, and the highlight was the Road America race this year, which is a great track, phenomenal track. And it was a challenge because one of the drivers had a really, really fast car. And it was a lot of working together with my teammates trying to keep up with him. And he ended up winning the races, but it was still really fun trying to keep up with him.
You were also in the spotlight in Indianapolis for the SCCA runoffs.
Yeah, the runoffs last year, that was an interesting one. Good story at the end of this one, but the runoffs is the national championship, obviously. And so I was starting 6th in that race. And after lap 1, I ended up 14th. I lost a ton of positions on the start because I had an outside starting position, so the whole inside row got a jump, the whole inside row went in front. After lap 5, I was back up to 5th. So I made a lot of passes in those first 5 laps and ended up running there and was able to make it back up to the lead pack, catch up to the lead pack after a safety car. Then we came around with 3 laps to go. I was making a pass for the lead. Got a little bit of a block, but oh well, didn't do anything about it. So I wasn't able to get into that lead. And then coming around the last lap, last corner, making a pass for 2nd, which is where I was hoping I would end up. My coach, who was also running that race, ended up rear-ending me and spinning me around. So then I fell back to 12th in that race, but it was a good race, learned a lot, and was able to make a lot of passes to move up to there despite the poor result.
You mentioned the Cahill team. You weren't the only driver. There were 3 and sometimes 4 drivers driving Cahill F1600s during the 2018 season. How did you differentiate between working together as teammates and racing on your own?
Yeah, that was a big thing with the year. Us, as the Cahill teammates, it started the year as 3, became 2 last year. This year was 3 the whole year. We're usually really good working together. That was our big advantage on Team Pelfrey, the other leading team. They had some issues in the team. They were unable to work together, which also helped with my win in Indianapolis last year, where they started battling. I was able to catch up, and I was able to pass them on the last lap. So working together, drafting, even sometimes letting off down the straightaway to give the partner a draft in the qualifying, or give them, if you know they're faster, let them in front, draft them, pull away from the rest of the field. That's big. Being unselfish, being aware of the situation.
Is this like Formula One? Are there team orders?
No, there's not team orders in this thing. They do say, they will tell us, oh, he's faster than you. You may need to let him pass to catch up with the front. But if it's a junior race, so they're not gonna force you to let him go.
This is a little bit of a delicate subject. Unfortunately, you weren't involved, but in at least one of the F-1600 races, two of the Cahill cars took each other out. What's it like in the paddock area after that?
People are a bit salty for a couple hours after that. But eventually we get settled out, and in the last race we were really good teammates. We knew who needed the good finish, and we ended up racing for the championship because that was the championship race in the last race this year. Us three Cahill drivers were 1, 2, and 3, so we raced it out pretty well.
Yeah, I mentioned that you've had 17 out of 20 top fives. There was only one race this season that he didn't finish. In fact, I think you finished every race last year, didn't you? So in 38 races, you've had one DNF.
Yeah, last year I was the only one, I believe, to do that. This year I only had one DNF, which I claim was not my fault. But yeah, that was in Summit Point, which was disappointing. That was also one of the big championship killers for me.
What happened?
So coming out of turn 1, I was on the left. The road, there's a kink in the road, and the guy on my inside, a Team Pelfrey driver, kept his steering wheel straight through the kink in the road. And so we ended up making wheel contact, and my front wheel broke, his wheel broke. So after the race, I go up to him and I'm like, oh, you ran into me? And he's like, no, I didn't run into you, I kept my wheel straight. I'm like, yes, the road turned, you needed to turn your wheel. So, it is what it is.
In addition to driving the F-1600 cars regularly, you had a chance to test an Atlantic Series car?
Yeah, that was last year. An Atlantic Series car, obviously much, much faster than the 1600 car, has more downforce than its weight actually. So that was a big jump. A lot more horsepower. And I drove it at VIR, which is a high-speed track. Turn 10 at VIR, just to give you an example of how much downforce the Atlantic cars have, is a braking corner in the 1600 car. In the Atlantic, it's flat out, not even a lift. So it's pretty tough because without the power steering, you can feel the downforce. So it's a lot of effort trying to get the wheel turned, hope the thing. It took me the whole day, and to get that corner flat out. And by the end, I was just closing my eyes and turning the wheel and hoping.
In addition to F-1600 this year, you also got your first try at USF 2000. Tell us a little bit about that weekend.
Yeah, that was a really fun weekend. USF 2000, of course, a part of the Road to Indy program, the lowest ladder, and I raced at MidOhio right after my outstanding MidOhio F-1600 race weekend. And that didn't start off so hot. We were having issues with the car, got 20th in qualifying, but then was able to get a 14th and 2 top 10s in that race out of 24. So that was pretty good for my first ever time racing a winged car. I was pretty happy with that one.
Tell us a little bit about the differences in the feel of the car and the way the racing went in the F-2000 car versus an F-1600.
Yeah, so the big thing that I'm still working on with those cars is braking. So because of the downforce, you can go into a corner and go pedal to the floor on the brake pedal because the downforce will prevent the front wheels from locking up because it pushes the wheels down when you brake, the weight goes to the front, and you can put as much pressure as you want. But the way it needs to work is as the front starts to lift back up, as you start losing speed, losing downforce, you need to get off the brake. So it's like a hard input and then slowly let go of the brake. That's a big thing that I need to work on. You can see the really good guys in the series on the data. The brake trace will spike and then be a perfectly diagonal line off of the brake trace. Right now I'm like,
Being as you are a racer of the 21st century, whereas the rest of us here are 20th century racers, tell us a little bit about what you think about Formula E.
Yeah, Formula E is an interesting series, new and upcoming. I think it has a great potential, especially because it's inviting racing to big cities. Like you see the one in Brooklyn that F1 never could have gotten, but because the cars are silent, all they need is the space on the road and they can run a full big race in Brooklyn. I think with some tuning, with some new technology, those cars can get much faster. They can go onto bigger tracks and have much bigger races in bigger cities.
One of your other interests, I understand, is robotics. What do you think of self-driving cars?
Yeah, self-driving cars are obviously controversial, but I think it's amazing for the technology. However, I'm afraid that it would affect like race car driving, because I'm afraid that if people start relying on self-driving cars, they're going to be like, oh, why are these guys driving a car? What's the point of this? Just have a self-driving car going around a track. That's entertainment.
We're going to open it up for questions in just a minute, but I guess the question you need to answer is, where do you go from here?
Yeah, so from here, it's not very linear. We just got to guess and hope it works out well. Most likely for next year, we're going to be running the USF 2000 series. And after that, it's up in the air. I could continue with the Mazda Road to Indy, which would eventually lead to IndyCar, or move to a racing series in Europe or something like that. That would lead to the F1 circuit.
Questions?
Yes, I've got a question, because you're so young and you got here so fast. What makes a good instructor in your experience? How do you tell a good driving instructor? What do they do?
Yeah, so I've had many types of driving instructors, and I have my favorites out of them all. My most favorite instructor was a karting instructor, and he was a French guy, very direct, very strict, and if you made a mistake, he'd let you know you made a mistake. I qualified on pole in a national event, my first ever pole in a national event, my highest finish in a national event. I came off expecting like, oh, nice job. And he was like, why would you not come into the pits earlier? You were fine. You didn't have to drive. You wasted the tires. I really like that, because it's not sugarcoating. It's not making you falsely think, oh, you're great. You have nothing to improve. It tells you exactly what you need to improve, and helps me progress from then on.
Where are you in school? What are you doing about school? And how does it fit into all of this?
Yeah, so school, I'm in a public school, and last year I think I missed 25 days of school for racing. Basically,
That's an acceptable excuse. Your mother wrote you a note.
We just tell the principal, we tell the superintendent, they know what it is. I get unexcused absences, but it's fine. We get nasty letters from the government. But I just get the work in advance, or make it up after, and as long as I make it up, the teachers are fine with it. It gets pretty tough sometimes, especially last year with the runoffs. You have to miss a full week of school. That was probably the toughest I've been, having so much to make up. But besides that, I just get the work, do the work, and then a lot of the things are online now, so that helps a lot, because there's something called Google Classroom, and that all the work is straight online. I can just do it from my home.
I told you it's the 20th, 21st century.
Where are you in school, and where are you in school, and how are you graded?
I'm in junior year of high school, and this year I have a 97 GPA.
You didn't mention, really quickly, how did you finish in USF 2000? But then also, what is the biggest reward you've gotten from doing this, and what's the biggest sacrifice?
USF 2000, I got a 14th, a 10th, and a 10th finish. There were 3 races in that that weekend, the biggest, that was the only race I did that year. The biggest, I love being in the car, going around, having fun, and making a career out of it as I do it. The biggest sacrifice has to be time, has to be school, has to be friends, because a lot of the time I have to be out, I have to be gone, missing out of school. So a lot of that is just the social things and the, like, if I want to go into the F1 series, the F1 line, I would have to move to Europe, which would be losing all the friends I had here, having to make new friends there. And even if I did go there, I'd likely be homeschooled, which would be difficult to make new friends. So yeah, it's just difficult trying to weigh out the education, weigh out the social life, and weigh out the racing life.
I have a couple questions. So, hi, I'm you. I'm Sam Tyler, mechanical engineer. I just also really like cars and stuff. You mentioned looking at the data traces from the races. Out of curiosity, if you had to deal with race engineers at all, what makes a good one?
Yeah, so I believe last year I had one of the best race engineers in the business. And the race engineers know exactly what it is. They will go out, they will watch you drive, and from that, my race engineer last year, I'd come off the track, he would ask, what do you think of the car, what do you want to change? I'd say something, he'd say, no, you're wrong. He'd say, I saw from this track, it was this. But he would also say, if it was in a practice session or a testing session, he'd say, okay, I'll put in what you want, send you out, and tell me what you think. And then almost all the time, I'd go out with what I thought, realize it was wrong, he'd put it to what he did, and it would be much better. And I'd learn from that. I'd be like, okay, now, if I feel this, now I want this. So it's really just the knowledge, the experience in the car, knowing exactly what change they have to make, knowing exactly what the car's doing, just from watching it, just from looking at the data.
This is kind of the difference between a family-run team and running for a team like Cahill or Team Pelfrey, where you have dedicated mechanics and dedicated engineers.
Yeah, my engineer has over 40 years doing this, so he has a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge, and he's been running with these cars for 15, 20 years.
Does he take apprentices for free?
Nice try. Other questions?
So it sounds like you've had a big jump in learning curves. How would you say your parents, did they have to go through those learning curves as well?
Yeah, I think it was,
We can ask them. Go ahead.
so I think it was, most of the thing is learning how to make decisions, learning how to move forward, and learning how to involve yourself. So you hear a lot of these stories from the team owners of how, oh, we would have picked this driver, but his parents were overly involved, or his parents were really rude, or always wanted it their way. So that's been big, them knowing exactly how much they should involve, how much they should help me, and how much they should help me progress through the thing. And you guys are in the room, but I would say this anyway, that I think you guys have done a great job, and I really appreciate it.
I guess the other point I would just go back to kind of reinforce what you've even said is that his family came in with no background in racing, so it wasn't like they had institutional experience or family history. This is not only new for Juven, it's new for his dad and his mother. Another question?
Yeah, more about your friends. How do you relate to them being as involved with the racing? Do you find it tough to talk to them about the racing?
Yeah, I usually just don't bring it up. They bring it up. But a lot of it's just because they think it's just driving a road car out on a racetrack. Yeah, so they're like, oh, it's just boring. I hate driving my road car. Why would you want to do this or whatever? But I just usually, in order to continue the social aspect, I'll bring up, oh, I did well in this race. I did this. But I also do a lot of other stuff. So I do snowboarding. I do robotics. So I'll bring that stuff up to try and create conversation. And if they get curious, they're like, oh, what about this racing? Then I'll explain.
Any more questions?
Are you involved in the robotics competition at your school, or?
My school does not have a robotics competition, but the Colony High School that Russ Burkhardt and his son are part of accepts different schools in the area. So I'm part of that. I've been doing that for 3 years now. Yeah, it is. It's really fun.
Other questions? Sam, another one?
Do you see parallels in, at least with the signal processing part of robotics and to data you see from the races?
Yeah, it's a lot similar. Especially because I'm in the programming aspect of the robotics team, just seeing how the physics works from it. So it hasn't been much in the recent years, but I saw the data, the programming from one year where they had what's it called? They had a field that was intentionally slick. So the robot would slide, it would be difficult to control. And just seeing how they managed to keep the robot from sliding was very similar to how we do it in racing, knowing the exact velocity that you can carry into the corner, the rotational angle of the corner and all that was pretty similar.
Do you have traction circles for it?
Any more questions? Got time maybe for one more, Peter?
Who's your racing hero?
My racing hero is pretty random, but it's Nico Rosberg. And a funny story with that is I picked him out of the blue. I picked him just like, I want a favorite driver. Who do I pick? Nico Rosberg. So then at my second ever F1 race, the year after the first one that he took me to, that was my first ever time being a Nico fan. The first time I didn't know who any of the people were. I was like, who's Sebastian Vettel? Who's this guy? I went there, and we were sitting next to this Scottish dude. I remember it like it was yesterday. And I was like, he was like, who do you support? And I was like, oh, Nico Rosberg. And he's like, why the heck would you support him? He's terrible. And I was like, oh, okay. And then after the event, he got his first ever pole position, and he won his first ever race. And I turned to him after the race. I'm like, that's why I like
I just want to take a minute to introduce Evan's parents. Stand up, please. We need to let Evan go because he's got to go to school tomorrow. One other person I want to introduce was Bob Wright. Bob, would you stand up? Bob. Bob's membership in SCCA goes back 45 years. He's a former editor of the Knockoff, and he is the founder of the F1600 series, as well as being a MoHud member.
Wow.
We're going to let Evan go in just a minute. We don't want to do this without having a couple of door prizes, though. So hold that. The question is, at what track did Evan win his first F1600 race? Somebody raise your hand and tell us. Peter Croft. Bob, come up here. You.
Probably doesn't have a Sharpie for signing the hat.
Sign the hat, yeah.
Thank you.
For another prize,
what is the official tire of the F1600 series?
Raise your hand and say it.
I thought I'm supposed to pick a winner, right there. Can I go back now?
Yes. Thank you all. Thank you, Evan.